Hello everybody and welcome back to RCT Creations. It's been a little while since the last time I did a commentary video, but we're going to go ahead and hop into it. This is RCT Construction here at Funland for the 1982 season. And what we're going to be building here today is a Schwarzkopf Shuttle Loop roller coaster. And these were fairly common in the late 70s and early 80s. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at this section of the park right here. My idea for this one is to kind of give this area right here an entrance into Minetown, a nice kind of welcome thing, kind of like how Gatekeeper at Cedar Point's in that spot there. So we're going to use this kind of pathway. It's the only path we have going into Minetown, and we're going to give it a nice, welcome with a vertical loop right over the top. So we're going to go ahead and raise this up. I kind of did a brief measurement for what this will look like. So once we have this up, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the fence on the inside here as well, just for continuity's sake. I accidentally got rid of that tree. Did not mean to do that, but that is okay. And then I'm just going to go ahead and build kind of a bridge over top. And what I'm going to do, it's going to get really quiet, so you're just going to be stuck listening to me, but you know what? I think we will all learn to deal with it. And the reason I like to pause is because if I ever have to modify the path, I have kind of a way to move the guests out of the way and kind of block paths. And if I ever need to get guests out of the way, I can just start the game after putting a couple no entry signs up. But with the way this is going to work, I shouldn't have to move any guests out of the way to make this work. So we're going to go ahead and put kind of a nice little roof area here. I'm going to have to go ahead and use the disable clearance checks to get this piece where I want it. So it's going to be kind of a narrow little tunnel there, but that'll be okay. And the reason I'm going to do that is just because I don't really want to use the tunnel, because that kind of divides the path into two separate sections. I really would rather avoid doing that, and we'll go ahead and jump right into the construction. So these Schwarzkopf shuttle loops, as I said earlier, mainly late 70s, early 80s. I think the last one to open was somewhere around 1982, and I think that was going to be the one at Knott's Berry, if I remember right, but I could be wrong. So we're going to start with this, and one thing I learned, I did a test construction of one of these. Every single vertical loop on these coasters goes to the left, which I thought was kind of interesting. Hey everybody, RCT Creations with a step in here. These loops actually go to the right, and since my brain has no sense of course correction, and to the left was the way I was originally going to build it, here we are. Thank you, I apologize for the error. Back to the video in relation to these coasters. And then we're just going to go ahead and build the layout. I'll add scenery later. And the way I kind of looked at it was we are going to do the booster. I'm going to put it in powered launch mode, but I'm going to use the boosters to get it up to speed. So it starts off a little bit slower and slowly kind of increases on speed as we go. And the launch track on these is going to be about 2 to 2.5 times the length of the train. I did a measurement on Google Earth, and the launch track for these shuttle loops was about 200 feet long. The problem being, though, with the measurements I found for the RCT tile length was about 3 to 4 meters, and if you plug 200 feet into meters, it would end up being around 60 tiles, I think, to make a 200-foot launch track, and that is just ridiculous in this game, especially with the scale of the vertical loops. And the height on these coasters was about 140 feet, and that's just way too much. The scale of the vertical loops in this game is much smaller than they would be in real life. So we are going to scale the launch track down, and I think the perfect outcome I kind of came up with for what the launch track should look like would be about 16 tiles. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to kind of carve the land out here in order to make it fit. And I'm sorry if I go quiet for brief sections. I'm dealing with some allergies right now. 'Tis the season. So if I go quiet for a little bit, I apologize. Anyway, back into it. So we have our first piece here. So my launch track with actual boosters, I want to be about 15 tiles. So we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And right there is going to be the end of my launch track. And then I'm going to have a 5-tile station to go ahead and fit the 7-car train. And I'm just going to go ahead and do this. A lot of people, when they play this game, and I've had comments on this, they ask me why I like to keep the entrance and exit buildings, and to me they just kind of feel RCT, and I love them. So I like to keep them in, but I mean, that's all up to personal preference. I don't It doesn't bother me either way, whether people keep them or remove them. I just like to have them there because the nostalgia factor plays a big part. So we have our station. We're going to do 5 sections of brakes. And these aren't actually going to do anything. They're going to just be for show because the brakes will actually work going backwards, which is interesting because the boosters, if a train's traveling forward, that's the only time the boosters will work. So a train traveling backwards will not be boosted. However, brakes will work if the train's going both directions. So I want 5 sets of brakes. And again, I just have them set to 50 miles an hour so they won't actually do anything. They're just going to be there for looks. And then we're going to go ahead and put the reverse spike on the top of this ride as well. And then the spike length, I believe I did 4 on the spike. So it'll be about 100 feet tall. In game and in real life, these spikes were about 150 feet. So that's about what I want to go for this. Now another thing I would like to do, and we can kind of start decorating the land to make it look better here, but this is going to be our general layout for the ride. And then what I'll do is I'll kind of match the land up just so it's not too off kilter here, and it kind of looks like there's a nice even setup there. So there's our basic layout. Now these are very straightforward, and I think that looks really good for length there. And this nice thing about this coaster is going to give Funland its first taste of a launch coaster. So we have a nice small footprint ride with a nice kind of entrance plaza area thing here for Minetown as you head over in that direction. Really liking the look of this. And now I'm going to go ahead and get my station kind of set up here. I mean, I know this layout is going to work. I did a test run on it. I should probably set it into the correct launch mode though. And I think I'll start my launch at about 30 miles an hour. We'll go about 30 miles an hour. So it'll be enough to give a nice little boost, but not too much right out of the gate because these launches weren't horribly powerful from everything I've heard. But, I mean, people raved about the Flywheel launch on the one at Knott's Berry Farm, Montezuma's Revenge, which is an interesting case in itself with the way that ride is going right now. So I'm going to go ahead and get my station kind of set up here. So I'm going to raise up a couple land pieces here for the brakes. Then the spike, I'm okay with looking on. And actually, instead of doing land, I think I'm going to do scenery pieces. I'm going to change my mind every once in a while on this. However, for the station, I am going to want land raised up, just so it's nice and even. So we'll do that. I'm going to have my entrance on this side here that faces towards our main midway here, because my goal is going to be to have our main entrance be right in the middle here at the very end, because I think it's a very popular spot. There's a lot of guests here all the time, and it's a nice entry plaza for this ride. So I'll go ahead and get my entrance placed. Typically, I like to put the entrance towards the front of the station if it's an uneven length, but since the station itself is 5 tiles, I'll put the entrance and exit smack dab in the middle, right there. So there is our entrance and exit. And I think for the most part, what I'm going to want to do for this ride, I think I'm going to leave the station itself uncovered. However, the queue area for the station, I'm going to have covered. So if I get my queue here, we're going to go ahead. These railings are just my favorites. This is typically what I like to use. So I'll kind of give it one of these. Just kind of have it snake around. In fact, no, I think I liked what I had before. So we'll just kind of have it do one of these. And I'll leave like a gap right here where potentially you could have a spot where an attendant would be an operator booth on either side of the station platform. And then what I will do is have it kind of loop back around and we'll have the queue drop out right there, which I think will look very nice. I'm just going to go with a pretty generic station tile here for the edges, and we can decorate that with scenery later if we would so choose. But I think that will look pretty nice right there. And then as far as the end of the launch track goes, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to cover this up here so it just looks like it's got some concrete edges along the side. So I'm really liking the look of that. So let's go ahead and get our coaster colored. I think what I'm going to do for the ride itself is have the track and supports be black up until we hit the vertical loop. So I want the loop support. I want the vertical loop to be orange in color, just to kind of set it up. Because the name of this coaster is going to be Ring of Fire. So it kind of has, you know, some feeling going over there. Very vague. I'm not going to act like it makes, you know, total sense, but I just like the idea of a loop, you know, a shuttle looping coaster. The first vertical loop of in the park total, because the only inverting coaster we have right now is going to be Corkscrew, which does not feature a vertical loop. And this would be the first taste of a vertical loop for all the guests here at this park. And even at the time, vertical loops were not horribly common in the early 1980s. So I'm liking the black track. We'll go ahead and do an alternative color scheme with the orange. And we're going to paint the vertical loop orange. I think I'll even have the track going into it and coming out of it match that color. So we have our ring right there. And then for the train colors, I'm going to go yellow on top, white with the orange divots on the front of the trains. So that will be the color of our train. Now I do have vehicle limits disabled to make my transfer tracks in the park work, but that's what we're going to go with. One train, 7 cars, right there. Now on the back end here, I want a service catwalk. So if we ever have maintenance that needs to inspect the brakes, we can. And since this part isn't going to be guest facing, the coloring on it is no big deal to me. I think gray would work just fine because, again, we're not going to have any guests on this side of the ride taking a look at it. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to have room for that type of catwalk, but we will have these ones right here underneath. And we're just going to do a generic gray support again because this is not going to be guest facing. And then what I'm also going to do here is we have this door for maintenance access into our restaurant here. And what I'm going to do is get that fenced off so that our employees would still have access to our building here, but obviously we don't want them coming in contact near our coaster here because that would be dangerous for them. So we're going to go ahead and get that fenced off on that side, and I'm going to fence in, just for a little bit of detail work, I'm going to fence in this back end here. Love Opus on RCT2's see-through vegetation option. I don't know if you guys remember, but back in the day when the original RCT2, when the only option you had and trees were considered scenery, you had to see through all the trees and all the fences and all the walls and all your buildings all at once. There was no separate options. I love the quality of life improvements this game has, because it makes it a lot easier to do what you want to do. And then also what I'm going to do is put a maintenance access gate right there. So if our maintenance team would ever need access into the ride area, they would have it. And I'm also going to fence in our supports here for our coaster. And since this won't be used as an employee area anymore, we can make that grass. And then since this will be our new kind of employee entry area to this building, we'll put that in right there. And then I'm going to put a gate right here as well, just in case they would ever need to get to the other side of that and go all the way around. So there's the back end of our coaster, which I think looks pretty good. The only thing I am missing right now is just some fencing on top here. And I think for that, what I'm going to do is make it probably not yellow. I think I'm going to go orange on it right here, because this is something guests would see on the ride and as they're riding. And then just for some detail work, what I will do is I'm going to do a yellow siding here on the side of our catwalk pieces here, just to give a touch of color on the back end. Just like that. So that gives us a little bit of color. And now on the launch track side, since the launch track is on ground level, I'm just going to go ahead and make this kind of dry. guess dirt textured would be the appropriate term, I believe. And I'm going to lower that down just so I can get the rest of my catwalk for the launch track in place as well. I'm going to do the exact same thing I did on the back end here with this gray tiling. And then that will take us all the way to the loop. And then we'll follow the same exact support structure on the back end. And what I can do for that is I'm going to remove those and just lower this down. And I think what I'll do is kind of flatten this terrain down a little bit, just like that. So that we have a nice even way there. And I think that'll look good. So again, we'll get this concreted over just so it looks like there was concrete work done on it. Just like that. And even what I'll do is I'm going to lower that one down, retexture it, just so we get the look I'm going for. And I think what I'll do is just have the catwalk come straight out here. So as soon as that dips, the land dips down underneath the track, I want to switch to catwalk for our maintenance team. If they ever need to, when they come to do their inspections in the morning, they have an avenue to inspect our launch track. And then we'll do the same orange fencing on the sides here as we did on front, and our station ends here, so this is where our launch track fencing will start coming down. And since that launch track is on ground level, we don't need the catwalk below it, but once we get to the point where it's off the ground, we'll put our fencing on the top here as well. And then with this, they also have access to the vertical loop piece as well. And I don't need to fence that in. So I think that looks pretty good. And then I'll do the same thing I did on that back end right there with the yellow. We'll get our yellow piece right here. And then what I can do, we're going to disable our clearance checks just so I can get that last textured piece in right there. And it's going to look a little weird with the land in the way, but we'll make it work to the best of our ability. Or even hide it like that. So now it's more hidden. You can get around the outside like that. And I'll do the same thing right here. We'll adjust the land and make it look like that. Excuse me. There we go. That'll work. And then what I could also do to kind of hide this ledge here is just put some vegetation, excuse me, in the way. And I think what I'll do here is we'll do this along the edge. And the reason I'm going to do that is so I can hide the fact that that's too low. So now we have our little wall going around the outside there. And I'll do that along the outside. There you go. So I think that looks pretty good. And actually, the more I'm looking at it, I think what I'll do... And this is something I do a lot when building. I don't know if anyone else does the same thing. But I tend to change my mind quite often when I'm in the middle of building stuff. So now I'll switch it to that, so when they're walking underneath, they can look up and see the coaster running above them. So we can kind of pretend this is like netting or something, just in case something were to happen, someone were to lose a loose item, anything like that. Now we have our nice little viewing area so guests can watch our coaster go directly over the top of them. Which I think is a pretty cool effect. So I think that looks pretty good. And before I even get to testing it, because I know the design will work, I'm going to go ahead and get working on our station piece here. Now, I tend to do very generic stations. If there's one thing with this game where I think I have a shortcoming, it's going to be in my ability to do good looking scenery. So all my stations kind of have a generic Cedar Fair, Six Flags style where they're just, I mean, they're not horrible, I don't think, but they just tend to be boxy and very plain. So we'll have that like that. And then, as I said before, we'll have a nice little path here just in case we have any attendants that need to be in the area. They have an avenue to walk that. And then I'll go ahead and put in a couple of fencing pieces here just to kind of keep our attendants out of the way of the ride area here. And actually, I think what I'll do, instead of doing fencing like that, we'll do the same launch track style railing, but just black. Just like that. So now that piece of the launch is out of the way. And I'm going to do it again. I'm going to change my mind again. I'm going to do maintenance access gates, just like that. So our maintenance team can get in there and get in there if they would ever need to, for whatever reason, outside of the station platform. And then I just tend to do our basic. I'll probably just do it in white. Basic support structure along the outside. And I don't even think, actually, as I said before, I don't even think I really want the station itself to be covered. I'm just going to cover the queue path here. So that's going to redo, change the way I look at this. So I'm actually going to put this along this side as well. And I'll keep my maintenance access gate there. But then what I'll do on its outside, I'll just put a chain link fence around it. And that's where our exit path is. And I'll still leave that maintenance access gate there if our team would ever need access to the launch track. So then we'll have our station building right here. And I'll do a double piece here. I think I'll just leave it white because I can retexture it with other pieces later if I would like. Just like that. And then I will go ahead and take... Oops, I used the wrong wall type. So I want it to be the more concrete style looking as opposed to the drywall aesthetic for this piece. I like the texture of this style wall more. And you might be the opposite, but I really like the texture of this wall style, especially with the roofing and the way that ends up looking. And then what I'll do is disable clearance checks just so I can put that wall there, because the one thing I don't like about having these entrance and exits is they kind of block your ability there. Now for the drywall, I think the color shows up better. So I'll do this. I'm going to go ahead and kind of decorate it with the different wall types around the edge. And we'll just alternate each block, both high and low. Because then we can take our orange pieces and give it a little bit of a texture. And now, since I used that base color underneath, I will use our roofing. I'm going to go with the gray and just put a nice generic. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to go up one more piece on this, because if I have the entrance building there clipping through, it will bother me immensely. So I'm going to go ahead and correct that. And now I will be happy. With it just like that. So there's our roof, and then another detail we can do is if you want, you can take kind of a fence style, and with the tile inspector, you can adjust the fencing on the top so that it's curved with the way you would like. So if I like this castle wall, I can put it up there along the outside and adjust it. And I'll do that with the colored one. Then on top, I'll do kind of this dark orange color. And then what I can do is I'll just do this. Then we'll go with the tile inspector. And we can use this castle wall, and right here we can slant it whichever direction we want. And you see me do this a lot in other episodes of Funcorp where I do our lift hill. I'll kind of have it do this along the top, just so it looks like there's a catwalk there, because the catwalks and the custom scenery sets, in my opinion, well, they just aren't my favorite. So I'll do something more like with just generic scenery. Then we'll do the same thing, and I always forget which way I want up, and I got it right that time. And there, our station kind of has a little bit of a texture to it there with the color, and again, very generic station building. And again, that's one thing I wish I was a little bit better at in this game, but you know, it works for me. And I think for the exit path, we'll have it go this way and duck underneath the launch track right here. Because I don't know if you have ever built a coaster like this one and then realized after you put everything together that, oh my goodness, I need a place for my exit path to go, and you don't have one. Because let me tell you, I have been there, and it is quite annoying when you don't plan for stuff you should have planned for. And we'll just kind of have it dip underneath here. We have it flatten out. And I want it to be able to pop back up right on the other side of the launch. Because this is where my queue overflow is going to be. So the exit path on this ride is going to be a little funky. And that's going to go kind of, it's kind of going to kind of wind around a little bit, but I think in the end it will look just fine. We'll have it kind of drop down next to this restroom here. And that is where our exit path will connect. And again, the nice thing about having the game paused right now is I can already go ahead and go in and place my no entry sign. So boom, guests can't get in this area now. Now I'll go ahead and texture these walls with the concrete work we've just done. Just like that. Oop, I need one more piece on this side, right here. Just like that. That looks good. And now we can start preparing our entrance path. Now our entrance path is going to take up this area here. So our exit path is going to be pretty high. It's going to be a little bit higher up than our entrance path is. We kind of start adjusting this based on what we want our entry path to look like. Let's have it drop straight down here. I'm thinking I want it to curve over and then drop down right here. And then we have space for two sets of overflows right here. So we'll have one and two. And they'll be set up a little bit differently than I normally do. So what I'm going to do, because I know I want my entrance to be right here. Right dead center, oops, sorry, right here, dead center of the end of the midway. Because we know that's where our guests are going to be drawn. They're going to be drawn towards the center here. And then what we're going to do is just wrap this around. Like so, just like that. And then what we can do as well is just kind of decorate the front here with some shrubs. Just kind of have a nice looking little entrance plaza. Now, as far as our overflow is concerned now, I'm probably just going to have one overflow lane. And it's going to dip this direction. And what I like to do is line it with these walls so that my queue path doesn't connect where I don't want it to. So we'll have it go around, zip down this way, next to that Aquatica entrance. And we'll have it stop right here. And then since this is going to be an area guests aren't going to see very much, let's do a couple of plain black fencing right there. Then we can have our queue path dip around and come back up. Now, a big thing I know I've said in the past, I like to do a lot of overflow because in real life, coasters will have a ton of overflow. If people want to be able to wait for it, they can wait for it. However, I've learned my lesson from Wildcat here because even when the park isn't horribly busy, this is always full and there's people constantly leaving line. Whereas opposed to Cyclone here, if we look through, we have plenty of overflow here and the queue line is very full, but people don't leave this line very often because with its 3 train operations, people are constantly getting on this ride. So I mean, there's plenty of time for guests to get on and get off. Well, not plenty of time. That's not really the phrasing I was looking for. But, I mean, there's just the throughput is very high on a coaster like Cyclone as opposed to a coaster like Wildcat. Because the difference between 28-passenger trains and 4-passenger trains is quite immense, believe it or not. So now we're looking here. We've got our launch track. It does look kind of generic, so what I will tend to do, I'll do the same thing I kind of did down here. I might just put some shrubs to kind of make it look nice. And just have a little bit of something in terms of detail work for our coaster. Just like that. And I'll also put a couple right there. Just for a little bit of added detail. And then on these slopes, I like to put a little bit of chain link fence in. Just so our guests are not able to climb into a spot where they should not be. And we'll just line this fencing along there. Like so. I do like to just kind of fill my queue out with my kind of overflow blockers. Oopsies. So there's our queue path. And I think that looks pretty nice. And now what I'll do is I'll put our marquee right here. And I'll do it on kind of a stone wall, and I'll do it with... Actually, I changed my mind on this. I'm going to do it with actual scenery. Sometimes it's fun to go into a project without much of a plan. You can just kind of develop the ride exactly how you want. So I'll get my bushes put back right here. And then what I'll do is I'll use some of these walls. And we'll put a couple of roofs on the top. And actually, I think I'm going to make that a little bit shorter. That's a little bit tall. And we'll go ahead and plop a couple of roofs on there. And we could drop our marquee right at the front of the ride here. I'm going to do it on white. I'm going to do orange text. Disable my clearance restrictions to make this a little bit lower, just like that. And now we can put our ride name on there. Now on the other side, I'm going to do the exact same thing. But instead of putting a marquee on it, this will be our queue timer. I might even drop one of these on top there. So right as guests get ready to get on, they know what the queue time for the ride looks like. And the more I'm looking at this, I'm not really liking the way that's turning out. So I'm going to adjust. Oops. We go. So I think I'm going to keep that in the same general spot. However, what I can do is adjust this. So I think this looks okay. And even what I'm going to do on the back side of it, I'll just put a little bit of color texture on it just to give it a little bit more detail. Just like that. And if that's going to be orange, I'm going to change the text color on this to yellow. That dark yellow. So now I know what that looks like. And I think what I'll do is have a post support sign here that has our queue time on it. I think that'll look okay. Yellow does not show up very well in the white. We can go that dark yellow color again though. And we'll put our queue time indicator right there. And I think that looks pretty darn good. And then what I'll do on the back end here, we'll get our fencing along this path so our guests are unable to get into a restricted area. And actually, I think what I'm going to do on this portion here is do a little archway that the train can launch through. So what that's going to involve is removing this piece. Just like that. And that'll give us a little bit of an excitement bonus when the train launches. That'll give the ride a little bit of an excitement bonus because now it has an underground tunnel. And then we can get rid of these fences here because they're no longer necessary because guests don't have access to that part of the ride. Awesome. And now what I'll do is I'll just add some vegetation along the outside here. Just to give a little bit more. Now, right off the bat, I'm going to clear some of that out. But I'll add some in other areas. Then what I typically do when I do this kind of work is I'll take the trees that I have in the same area, so that the surroundings match what we now have. And what's already there. Place that tree with one of those. And I think that looks pretty darn good. So boom, there's our new coaster. Let's go ahead and give her a test run. So it starts with a slower boost, and then we'll pick up speed as it continues down the track. Pass through the station, through our brakes, and right into the station. And again, since the brakes are non-functional, it will pass through those at full speed, but they are there just to add a little bit more detail. So there you go. Funland officially has its first inversion, or its first vertical loop, excuse me. We already have our first inversions with corkscrew, but our first vertical loop and first launch coaster. Now, before I hop off here, what I would like to do is give an update on the Fun Corporation series. I don't think I'm going to do individual episodes anymore, and in fact, I'm not going to do individual episodes anymore. I think what I'm going to do, after I put together that decade time-lapse, or not even really a time-lapse, but just kind of the title screen that I use, I like the idea of going through and going by the decade from here on out, because I found that when I was doing the individual episodes, I was doing the same thing over and over and over again, and there really wasn't a whole lot of new information, and most of the time the parks remained mostly the same anyway. So from here on out, we're going to go ahead and do our Fun Corporation episodes by the decade. And the next episode will be on the 1980s. So it'll be the year 1980 all the way through 1989. And we will be back then. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of RCT Construction. I look forward to seeing you all again. Have a good one.